My boyfriend's close female friend clearly dislikes me and doesn't hide it. I'm at the point where it's either her or me. How do I talk to my BF? Let me cut right to the chase. I'm a 29-year-old woman, and for the past 3 years, I've been sharing my life in an apartment with my boyfriend, Mark. We'd met through mutual friends at a lively party, and from the start, there was an instant connection. We spent hours chatting that night, sharing our dreams, our favorite movies, and even our most embarrassing childhood stories. It felt like we'd known each other for ages, and before long, we decided to take the plunge and move in together. Things were going relatively smoothly in the beginning. We'd have lazy Sunday mornings, making pancakes in our tiny kitchen and sipping coffee as we planned our week ahead. Weekends were often filled with hikes in the nearby mountains, holding hands and breathing in the fresh air, or exploring new restaurants in the city, trying out exotic dishes and laughing over shared desserts. But then there was Nell, a 34-year-old woman who'd been in Mark's life long before I came along. I was all for him having friends, male or female. I mean, I've got my own crew of guy pals, and I know how important those friendships can be. So, when I first heard about Nell, I didn't bat an eye. I was ready to embrace her as part of our extended social circle, thinking we'd all get along just fine. But that first meeting? Oh boy, it was a doozy. We'd arranged to meet at a local bar, and I was actually excited to put a face to the name. I'd spent a bit of time getting ready, picking out an outfit that was casual but cute. I went through my closet, trying on a few different tops until I found the one that made my eyes pop, and paired it with my favorite jeans that hugged me in all the right places. I took extra time with my hair, curling the ends just so to give it a bit of bounce, and applying my makeup with a light hand to enhance my features. When Nell walked in, her eyes immediately zeroed in on Mark, and she practically skipped over to him, a huge grin on her face. It was like I was invisible. But then, as if remembering her manners at the last second, she turned to me. The moment our hands touched for that handshake, I felt her nails dig into my skin hard. It wasn't an accidental graze. It was a deliberate, painful pinch. And just like that, the mood was set. Throughout the evening, it only got worse. Every time I tried to engage in the conversation, Nell would either interrupt me or give me these dismissive side-eye glances. There was one point when I was talking about a book I'd recently read, a fascinating novel that had me hooked from the first page. I was getting into the plot, sharing my thoughts on the complex characters, when Nell let out a loud, fake yawn and said, "Oh, that sounds so boring. I don't have time for that kind of stuff." She then turned her attention back to Mark, launching into a story about some party she'd been to, laughing and gesturing animatedly, completely shutting me out. When I took the seat beside Mark, I could practically feel the frost radiating from her. She huffed quietly and shifted in her seat, her body language screaming her displeasure. And then, halfway through the night, without so much as a goodbye or a glance in my direction, she just got up and left. I was left sitting there, feeling like I'd been sucker punched. But I tried to brush it off, telling myself that not everyone clicks right away, and it wasn't the end of the world if we didn't become besties. As time trudged on, it became painfully clear that Nell's attitude towards me wasn't going to change for the better. In fact, it seemed to be worsening with each passing encounter. Whenever we were in a group setting, which was often since Mark and I were quite social, Nell would find the most devious ways to undermine me. There was this one barbecue we went to at a friend's place. The sun was shining, music was playing in the background, and everyone was having a great time, or so I thought. I was chatting with a few of the other guests, sharing a laugh about a recent funny incident at work. Out of nowhere, Nell sauntered over, a smirk on her face. She butted into the conversation and said, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, you think that's funny? Well, your laugh is so grating, it kind of ruins the moment." The group went silent, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. I looked over at Mark, hoping he'd say something, anything to defend me. But he just stood there, a blank look on his face, as if he hadn't even heard what she'd said. Another time, we were at a small get-together at a local coffee shop. I was excited to try a new latte flavor they had on the menu, and had just taken my first sip when Nell leaned across the table and said, "You know, that color doesn't really do you any favors. It makes you look washed out." She said it with a sickly sweet smile, as if she was just being helpful. I was so taken aback that I nearly choked on my drink. And again, Mark was right there, yet he remained mute. It wasn't just her hurtful comments. The way she interacted with Mark in front of me was equally maddening. Whenever they greeted each other, she'd go in for an overly long, lingering hug, squeezing him tight and giggling like a schoolgirl. But when it came to me, she'd offer a limp handshake or a half-hearted wave, if that. It was like she was deliberately trying to make me feel like an outsider in my own relationship. After enduring this kind of treatment for months, I reached my breaking point. I decided that I didn't need to subject myself to this toxicity any longer. So, I started making excuses to avoid events where Nell would be present. At first, it was a bit awkward, having to come up with reasons not to go to certain parties or hangouts. But as the days passed, it became easier. I realized that my peace of mind was worth more than trying to fit in with someone who clearly didn't want me around. Before long, I hadn't seen Nell in about a year. Mark, however, continued to see her regularly. They'd go out for coffee, catch a movie, or just text back and forth constantly. Every time I saw his phone light up with a message from her, a pang of unease would shoot through me. I couldn't help but wonder what they were talking about, especially since he never seemed to share any details with me. The doubts that had been festering in my mind for so long reached a fever pitch the other day. Mark had left his phone on the kitchen counter, and as I walked by, a text notification popped up. It was from Nell. My curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced down. What I saw made my heart drop like a stone. There, on the screen, was a heart emoji that she'd sent, followed by Mark's response saying something about how he was thinking of her. I froze, staring at the phone in disbelief. My mind started racing a million miles a minute. What did this mean? Were they just being friendly? Or was there something more going on? I knew I should have confronted Mark right then and there, but I felt like I'd been sucker punched and all the air had been sucked out of me. Instead, I numbly walked away and climbed into bed, pulling the covers over my head as if I could hide from the reality that was crashing down around me. That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, my thoughts consumed by Mark and Nell. I replayed every interaction I'd had with her, every time Mark had failed to stand up for me, and it all started to make sense. I was convinced that there was no way this was just an innocent friendship. There had to be something deeper, something they were hiding from me. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy heart and dark circles under my eyes. I knew I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I had to talk to Mark to finally get to the bottom of this. But the thought of confronting him terrified me. What if he admitted that he had feelings for Nell? What if he chose her over me? I spent the day in a daze, going through the motions at work, but not really accomplishing anything. When I got home, Mark was already there, lounging on the couch, watching TV. I took a deep breath and sat down next to him. "Mark," I started, my voice shaky. "We need to talk." He looked over at me, a bit of confusion in his eyes. "Sure, babe. What's up?" I swallowed hard and told him about seeing the text. I tried to keep my voice calm, but the hurt and anger were seeping through. I asked him straight out if there was anything going on between him and Nell. Mark's face paled for a moment, and then he quickly regained his composure. He denied it vehemently, saying that they were just friends and that the heart emoji didn't mean anything. He made me feel like I was being paranoid, like I was blowing things out of proportion. I wanted so badly to believe him, but the doubts wouldn't go away. I told him about all the times Nell had been mean to me, how he'd never done anything about it. I said that I couldn't keep living like this, feeling like the third wheel in my own relationship. Mark just sat there, listening half-heartedly. When I was done, he shrugged and said, "You're just jealous, babe. Nell's been my friend for years, and you need to get over it." Those words were like a knife to the heart. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let him see me cry. I got up and walked away, knowing that I couldn't continue like this. I needed to make a decision, and fast. That conversation with Mark left me feeling more alone and confused than ever. I spent the next few days in a fog, going through the motions of daily life, but feeling completely detached. I replayed his words in my head over and over again, and each time, the pain of his dismissal cut deeper. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I deserved to be in a relationship where I felt respected and loved, not constantly on edge and second-guessing myself. After a lot of tearful soul-searching, I finally made up my mind. I decided that the best thing for me to do was to walk away from the relationship. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. I loved Mark, and we had shared so many wonderful memories together. But those memories were now tainted by the way he had allowed Nell to treat me and his refusal to address my concerns. I realized that if he couldn't see how much his actions were hurting me, then there was no hope for us. I sat Mark down one evening, determined to have a calm and honest conversation. I told him how I had been feeling, how I always felt like the third wheel in our relationship. I recounted specific instances when Nell had been cruel to me, like the time at the barbecue when she humiliated me in front of everyone, and how he had just stood there. I also mentioned the text exchange that had been the final straw. I told him that I still cared about him and wanted him to be happy, but that I also needed to prioritize my own happiness. I couldn't continue to sacrifice my self-esteem and well-being for a relationship that was making me miserable. Mark sat silently for a while, and I could see the gears turning in his head. But when he finally spoke, his words were like a slap in the face. "So, "You're jealous of Nell?" he asked, as if he hadn't heard a single word I'd said. I felt like he had completely missed the point, and I tried to clarify. I told him that this wasn't about jealousy. It was about respect and boundaries. But he got defensive, his voice rising as he told me he was allowed to have female friends. I could tell he wanted to turn it into an argument, and I didn't have the energy for it. My mind was already made up, and I had said what I needed to say. I ended the conversation and got up to leave. As I packed my things, Mark just sat there, staring blankly at the TV. He then got up and went to play a computer game, acting as if I wasn't even there. I walked out the door with a heavy heart, but also a sense of relief. I knew that I had made the right decision for myself, even if it was painful. I went straight to my best friend's place, and as soon as she opened the door, I burst into tears. She wrapped her arms around me and held me tight, and we hugged it out. That night, we had a movie night with a pizza and some wine. It was exactly what I needed. We laughed at the silly movie, and for a moment, I forgot about all the pain. It felt therapeutic, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My best friend was amazing throughout it all, offering words of comfort and support. She told me that I was strong and that I had made the right choice. My family was also incredibly supportive. They rallied around me, taking me out for little meals and checking in on me regularly. I even received a couple of sweet messages from Mark's friends, saying they were sorry and that they understood my point of view. It was a small comfort, but it meant a lot to me. I thought that walking away from Mark and that whole mess would be the end of it. I was ready to focus on picking up the pieces and moving forward with my life. But the universe had one more curveball to throw my way. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of messages from an unknown number. As I groggily opened my phone, I was shocked to see that it was Nell. I honestly never expected to hear from her, especially not after everything that had happened. There were walls and walls of text, and as I scrolled through them, my disbelief turned to anger. She repeatedly insisted that she had never bullied me. According to her, she had no idea where that came from. She claimed that I had always seemed cold towards her, so she had tried to make little jokes to break the ice. But those so-called jokes were nothing more than thinly veiled insults that had left me feeling humiliated time and time again. She then told me I was making things up by suggesting she ever had a thing with Mark. They were, in her words, just friends. To top it all off, she finished with a passive-aggressive apology. She said I had ruined my own relationship by being jealous and listening to voices in my head. It was as if she was trying to shift the blame entirely onto me, absolving herself of any wrongdoing. I read through her messages once, twice, and then a third time, my blood boiling. But I refused to give her the satisfaction of a response. I knew that was exactly what she wanted, for me to engage in an argument so she could continue to belittle me. Instead, I took a deep breath and deleted the messages. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to let her or Mark have any more power over my emotions. I was going to focus on rebuilding my self-esteem and finding my own happiness. I started by doing things that I loved. I picked up that novel I had been meaning to read for months and lost myself in its pages. I went for long walks in the park, breathing in the fresh air and listening to my favorite music. I even signed up for a painting class, something I had always been curious about, but never had the time for. My ex, Mark, hadn't tried to contact me since I left, and I was glad. It was clear that he wasn't willing to make the changes I needed, and I was better off without him. In fact, I started to see that he and Nell were two peas in a pod. They both seemed to thrive on drama and making others feel small. As the days passed, things started to look up. My best friend and I finalized our plans to officially share a place together. We spent hours looking at apartments, imagining our new life in each one. And then, out of nowhere, I got some amazing news. I had been promoted at work. It was like a sign from the universe that I was on the right track. Now, when I look back on that whole ordeal, I'm proud of myself for having the courage to walk away. I no longer feel like the victim. Instead, I feel empowered. I know that I deserve better than what Mark and Nell were offering, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. There are still challenges ahead, of course, but I'm ready to face them head on, with my head held high and a smile on my face.